Hey folks, I just saw a post I put on my Facebook page. It's called Elmore Leonard's 10 Rules of Writing. And I'd like to go through that now because a lot of people are interested in writing and they don't know how to get about it. I have my own theory. And one of the things I've learned the hard way is that every would be writer has a million words of bullshit clogging his system, and you have to get that out to get to the good stuff. And that means that writers are people who write. They don't think about it, they don't talk about it. They sit down and they write every day. Uh, they type out the words, they write the words in longhand, or some people I know dictate the words into a tape recorder and then have them transcribed later. But writers are people who have to write. So if you want to be a writer and you're not writing, don't kid yourself. One of the things I recommend to every would be writer is to carry a notebook and a pad with you at all times. A notebook and a pad with you at all times. Uh, a notebook and a pen. So that you can write down any ideas that come your way. Uh, we've all had ideas, and then we think, wow, that's a great idea. And then later on, you say, well, what was that idea I had? Man, I wish I had written it down. It doesn't have to be a big, bulky, legal size notepad. It can be a little notepad that fits in your pocket. I have several of those, but it's very important to carry a notepad and a pen with you at all times. Some people speak into their personal device. You can do that if you wish. I'm old fashioned in that way. I believe that composing the words with a pen helps solidify them in your memory, and that if you don't have a notepad, you should say the idea out loud because that will also help fix it in your memory. Now, I want to go over Elmore Leonard's 10 rules of writing. And for those who don't know who Elmore Leonard is, he was a very popular writer, and many of his books were made into movies, especially the westerns. And the one that strikes me the strongest is Valdez is Coming, which was made into a brilliant western starring Burt Lancaster. I urge you all to see it. So let's go through Elmore Leonard's 10 rules of writing. Never open a book with weather. Well, that lets Snoopy out because Snoopy always started his book. It was a dark and stormy night. Uh, Now, remember, folks, that all rules are made to be broken, but only when you've mastered the rules. That's one of Elmore's rules. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I stick to it for the most part because I usually open my writing, if it's fiction, I open it with a setting, with a description of the setting. I think giving a sense of place is a very good way to start a story. Number two, avoid prologues. Well, again, this worked for Elmore, but remember that he wrote very short books, and we'll get to that rule in a minute. Uh, I favor a narrative that begins at the beginning and ends at the end with no flashbacks. Howard Hawks had a memorable phrase about flashbacks. He said, what's good about them? If you're not good enough to tell a story without having flashbacks, why the hell do you try to tell them? Oh, I think some extraordinarily good writer can figure out some way of telling a story in flashbacks, but I hate them, just like I hate screwed up camera angles. I like to tell it with a simple scene. I don't want to be conscious that this is dramatic because it throws it all off. When I was young and foolish and started writing, I couldn't get away with flashbacks, but there are ways to impart the knowledge of what happened in the past into the narrative seamlessly. And one way is to have one character tell another what happened. Uh, I'm not against flashbacks, I've used them myself. I'm just telling you what Elmore Leonard says. Three, never use a verb other than said to carry dialogue. Well, that's an important rule, and for the most part, it's true. There's nothing wrong with the word said. But there will be occasions when you want to substitute another verb, and the creative use of verbs is one of the things that makes writing come alive. John shouted. Janet wept. Those are permissible in the context of the story. So again, take Elmore Leonard's rules with a grain of salt and understand that although they never fail, they're not always necessary. 4. Never use an adverb to modify the verb said, he admonished gravely. And there's Elmore giving good advice and breaking it at the same time. And there are times when you want to modify the verb said, but more importantly, you want to use another verb that gets the idea across without using said, such as John shouted or Janet wept. 5. Keep your exclamation points under control. You are allowed no more than 2 or 3 per 100,000 words of prose. Well, yes and no. If you're going to put it into the prose itself and you're not quoting a character, that's good advice. Exclamation points outside the context of speech may seem pretentious or unnecessary. But when you're quoting someone and they're shouting, it's okay to use an exclamation point. 6. Never use the word suddenly or all hell broke loose. I think that's pretty good advice. What you want to do is to describe what's happening in vivid language. And this comes to the creative use of verbs once again. Use the right verb for the job. I often make up my own verbs, and within the context of the story, they're understood. It's no problem. One of my favorite writers, James Ellroy, one of the most distinctive voices in American literature, wrote about a character who brodied the big car up the hill. And I had never heard the word brodied before, but I knew exactly what he meant. He meant that the author kept turning the wheel from side to side, looking for traction, making his way up the hill. 7. Use regional dialect, patois sparingly. That's excellent advice. If you're writing about a character who lives in New Orleans and lived there all their life, you only need to use a local phrase once or twice to establish their dialogue. I said that, me, which is how they talk. You say that once, you don't have to repeat it. You don't have to keep searching for slang words to pepper your dialogue. If you're writing an Australian character and he says, "Who's that Sheila?" That's really all you need. You don't need to go looking for a whole bunch of Australian slang to prove you know what you're doing. 8. Avoid detailed descriptions of characters. Well, that's one that comes with a grain of salt. I'll never forget when I was studying English in high school, one of our assignments was to describe a character as vividly and minutely as you can. Charles Dickens certainly ignored that rule because he goes into very lengthy descriptions of his characters. 9. Don't go into great detail describing places and things. Tell that to Tom Wolfe. Tom Wolfe wrote Bonfire of the Vanities and many other great books, and Tom Wolfe will spend a page or two describing the wainscoting in a building. It's never boring. It's part of the story. So take Elmore's rules with a grain of salt. 10. Try to leave out the part that readers tend to skip. And that's very good advice, because what it means is that you can lead your reader anywhere into the most outlandish situations if the writing itself is vivid and interesting. Michael Chabon, who wrote The Thrilling Adventures oh man, I'm spacing on it. But he wrote a novel called Telegraph Avenue. The thrilling adventure, the amazing adventures of Cavalier and Clay. The amazing adventures of Cavalier and Clay. Now, if you're a comic book fan, I know you've heard of that book, and many of you have read it. And it's an excellent book. His book, Telegraph Avenue, contains a chapter that's about 6,000 words long. And it's all one sentence. It's about the adventure of a parrot escaping from its cage. It never flags, it never loses your interest. But Michael Chabon has a unique way with dialogue and a vast understanding of words, far greater than my own or that of most writers for that matter. And he can get away with things that most other writers can't because of the vividness of his language and his creative use of words. I have 3 rules myself for writing. They're very simple. I probably have a lot more, but I have these 3 rules that I keep in mind all the time. Oh, look, there's a dead dog on the bed behind me. Some people find that distracting. Rule number 1 is it's my job to entertain. That may seem simple and obvious on the face of it, but it's not so simple or obvious. And if you keep that in mind, you won't lose your readers. Yes, your writing will be entertaining. If you're not sure that your writing is entertaining, it's probably not. Most of the good writers I know are very confident of their writing when it leaves. They don't say, oh, I hope people will like it. I hope it's good. A good writer, especially those who work in genres which have well established rules, and I don't want to use that word. I don't want to use that word, but I'm going to use that word tropes, like a Western. They're on familiar ground and they know what good writing is and what isn't. It's fresh, it's exciting. That doesn't mean you haven't been there before. I have a very good friend who's a Western writer, and his books are absolutely gripping from the first sentence. They're all about revenge, every one of them. People love revenge, they can't get enough of it. It's a good topic, but so is love, and so is the discovery of a new world. I'm just saying that as a theme, that's a very popular theme and one that can be explored forever without running out of room. My second rule is show, don't tell, which may seem obvious on the face of it, but it's not. And what I mean by that is you can say John entered the alley hoping to get home before midnight. He was halfway down the alley when someone shot him in the back. Or you'd say John entered the alley. He was acutely aware of the smell of sewage and the graffiti on the grainy walls next to him as he walked down towards the far end. When a Mack truck slammed into him and he found himself shoved up against the red brick, sliding to the alley ground with granules of red brick sticking in his skin. He fell on his face and felt a warm wetness pool in the small of his back. It was only then that he registered he had heard a sharp report, and that shows that he was shot. My third rule is to be original. This goes without saying. You don't want to copy somebody else's work. They say there are only 7 basic plots in fiction, but we're all unique human beings, and we all bring our own twist to whatever it is we're describing or telling. So don't hesitate to bring your personal experiences into the story. That's what's going to make the book unique. We all think about things. We all have impressions when we ride the subway or drive in our car across the vast Midwest, past endless prairie. We see the sign up ahead. Services, 12 miles, food, lodging. You see that sign. It's got the symbol for McDonald's, Arby's, Taco Bell, Taco John, Wendy's, whatever. You put that in your book. It has the smack of truth about it. It's your own personal observation, however way you want to phrase it. So those are my 3 rules. 1, always be in mind that it's your job to entertain. 2, show don't tell. 3, be original. Now, I'm sure I have a lot more, but those are the 3 I keep coming back to. And I hope this has been of help to you. Thank you.